Okay, so hello everyone. Sorry for the short delay, which was due to some technical issues. Wait a bit more for everyone to log on and adjust the settings before we start. Can already say Happy New Year. I guess it's not yet too late to say Happy New Year. Hope you all had nice holidays and a good start and a healthy start to the new year. Today's webinar is about the European Biochar Certificate, and today's event is actually a cooperation with the Finnish Biochar Association and the Norwegian Biochar Network. So it's very nice that we managed to pull this off as a joint event. Before we start with today's event, I'm already going to flag our next event, which is going to be in 1 month, February 12th from 9 to 10. It's a Friday. So we go back to our usual Friday webinars, 9 to 10 Central European time, which means 10 to 11 for friends in Finland. And this will be a virtual tour in the new pilot facility in Helsinki, which focuses on pyrolysis of sludge fractions. So that's going to be interesting. A bit on today's webinar. As said, it's going to be about the European Biochar Certificate, and we do have two quite prominent guests, I would say, as presenters today. You've probably heard or even heard of them or even met them before. We have Hans-Peter Schmidt from the Ithaca Institute, who is going to present the European Biochar Certificate, and we have Matthias Gustafsson from Ecotopic, who is going to talk a bit about how he has worked towards making the biochar certificate more accessible or more relevant for the Swedish market. So this is what's happening today. Hans-Peter, I'm not sure if the screen sharing works now for you. If not, I'll just share your presentation and you will have to tell me when to move forward in the presentation. A bit organization and what's going to happen today. We start with Hans-Peter Schmidt, who's going to talk about the EBC. Matthias is going to talk about the Swedish amendment, and you will have some time to ask questions in the end. I'll ask you to write the questions in the chat. There is two possibilities for that. There's a question and answer section, which will be visible to everyone, or you can just write them in the chat to the panelists. And we will then sort them a bit and collect the questions and ask them in the end to our presenters. So thank you already for joining, for presenting. I'll stop sharing and see if Hans-Peter, would you like to try sharing your screen again? If that doesn't work, then I'll just share your presentation.
Yeah, just share it, please, from your computer. Doesn't work for now. And yeah, hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you and to present in a short 35 minutes the certification, the EBC certification, and so it's not so much time, and I hope I can give you a good impression of what it is and how it works. So could you press next? So just some short facts. So the EBC exists since 2011 with the first certifications, and it is an industry standard, which is EBI recognized, and in some countries is also legally binding. So if you want to use biochar, for example, in Switzerland as a soil amendment, you have to provide the EBC certificate. Other countries, they are oriented to the thresholds or to the procedures. Also the new European legislation, probably from 2022, is oriented on the EBC standards, and we looked at it's always according to all parameters in the European community, at least. So the EBC is developed and owned by the Ithaca Institute, but the controlling, the on-site control is done by independent government accredited organization. So is bioinspector, and the laboratories use specified biochar analysis, and they are also government accredited. So in fact, Ithaca is only the one who creates the standard. The controlling is not done by us. We have 31 companies in 10 countries for the moment, and then we see a strong increase, especially during last year. Many companies joining this year already registered on the website. It is a certification for biochar producers, so that's what we started on in 2011. And then we saw that we need to extend it also to companies that produce biochar-based products, so that they can assure that the biochar that they use in their compost or in their building material was produced according to the EBC. So we also certify companies that produce biochar-based products and also traders of biochar and biochar-based products. Since 2020, we introduced the first carbon sink certificate. So this is the first certificate that really certifies how much carbon is extracted from the atmosphere and stored in the terrestrial system. We will see in the end, if we have some minutes, so I could shortly introduce this, but our presentation today is on the standard EBC. So to the next slide, please. If we start what biochar is, and that means what we in the end certify. So we have to agree on some definitions, and the EBC came up with what we present here. So biochar is a porous carbonaceous material. So that's from the material definition side. Next. It is produced by pyrolysis of plant biomasses. So this is what it's made from and how it is made. Next. And it is applied in such a way that the contained carbon remains stored as a long-term carbon sink. So we also have in the definition the application or the use of it. And to the difference to charcoal, which can be burned or is usually produced to be combusted or used in an oxidative way, biochar should be used in a way that the carbon remains stored in the terrestrial system. Next. Or it replaces fossil carbon in industrial manufacturing, like for example, if you do composite materials or plastics, and then you replace fossil carbon. And that brings us to the conclusion. Next. It is not made to be burned for energy generation. So it's a material definition. And that's what we are oriented in the certificate to assure that in the end, it's about biochar that the product is made from. Next. Because we can see it's very difficult to clearly define by material properties what biochar is. If you look to the next 3 slides very quickly, you see these are 3 different biochars made from 3 different biomass feedstock. Next, and then you see you have a carbon content and, for example, phosphor content of 18.4 and 61,000. Next. Now we have another biochar with a carbon content of 48%, but only 6,000, so 10 times less phosphorus. And the next, you find a biochar that has 80% of carbon and even less phosphorus. And all of these 3, next, are considered biochar. Next. And you see, we can have very different material properties. But what the certification in the end of the EBC is about is not so much to define a certain use of it or to define material properties, but to assure that you can apply it in an environmental sound way. It means that the company that produces it and sells it, they have to define what it's good for. That's not our business. Our business is to assure that it does not make any harm to the environment, to the user, to the soil, and that it's in accordance to other government rules for agriculture or for animal farming or for materials. Next. So that's the base of our guidelines. Next, that are now in the version 9. So this is regularly adapted and improved. And so we have 4 main pillars. Next. So the one and the first thing is the feedstock material, which has to be plant-based materials, and we check that it's sustainably provided and produced. Next, we look to the pyrolysis technology as such, so that it has low emissions, especially and it's energy efficient. Next, then we look to the biochar quality, so as material quality with laboratory analysis to assure that especially there are low contaminant levels. Next, and we go up to the use and application to assure that, for example, a farmer that buys the biochar will not get dusty lungs or has explosion danger on his farm, so that it is provided and applied in the right way. And so we check now these 4 points on how we really do it in the certification. Next. So controlling the feedstock, you can, so what I do here is just a short wrap up. You find these guidelines, they're about 50 pages, and we always try to explain it in a comprehensible way, do it easy, and try with examples to give the reader the possibility to follow it easily. So we hope you can read it and follow more detailed what I do here in a short overview. So we defined what feedstock can be allowed, and if you look to the next, we have a positive list for biomass. Next, Catherine, please. So this is quite an extensive list of feedstocks with different origins. So this is only one part of it. So you have the origin, it can come from agriculture or from forestry or from food waste management and so on. It's defined, it has an ID number, and then you have some special requirements. So when you declare your biochar production, you select the feedstocks. It can also be a mixture of different feedstocks. And different feedstocks can be used for different classes of the EBC. So we have a material class, we have a class for agriculture, for organic agriculture, and for animal feed. So you select the feedstock list, and there are requirements that are, for example, if you want to have organic EBC, organic biochar for soil, then it should not come from non-organic biomass production, for example. Okay, next. So these are, again, these 4 classes that we introduced in 2020. And this system is prepared for new application classes. that makes it flexible to adapt to different parameters that are more important, for example, for agriculture, than if you want to use the biochar as a building material. So we can adapt here the threshold values and also the analysis that has to be done. For the moment, we do not include biochar from animal manure or from sewage sludge, but this is in preparation, and it will become also a new class within the system. Next. It is important to assure that there are low contaminant levels of the feedstock. You can never exclude that in organic materials, like from landscape management or even from agriculture, that there are no plastic wastes, or that there will be a screw from the harvester or something. So we try to assure, or we assure that there is a clean separation in the preparation of the feedstock. For example, if you do animal feed, you need a magnetic separator to assure that there are no metal pieces in it. Or you have to mill it to make sure that there are no glass parts that could cut into the digestive system of the animal. However, if you make a biochar material for asphalt, this doesn't matter so much. So that's why we have different requirements for different application classes. And we work on plastic and especially on plastic contamination. And we could show that even at higher plastic contaminations, we do not find any residues in the biochar from it. There's no toxic substances. So for the moment, we allow 1% of plastics for agricultural applications. But we're working here on a more flexible approach because we know that in the recycling of organic wastes, plastic is the main problem, and pyrolysis is the only solution to get rid of the plastics. So what we do already for the moment is that for EBC materials, we allow up to 15% of plastic and rubber contaminations. Next. So we check then when feedstock is clear, we check the quality of the biochar, and we have here the biochar carbon content and nutrient content that have to be declared, but this is not a threshold. We had in earlier versions thresholds of 50% or something for the carbon, but in fact, because we select the feedstock we say it has to be a vegetable feedstock, there is no limitation on the carbon content for the biochar. However, we need hydrogen to carbon ratio, because that is a sign for how complete the pyrolysis process was done. And then there are thresholds for the heavy metals, as you can see in the next. So these are the relevant heavy metals that are used in European and country codes for fertilizers. And as you can see here, material for EBC materials, thresholds are much higher because they cannot leach to soil, they cannot contaminate groundwater. So we have higher thresholds, but for organic and for feed, these are lower. So all these thresholds is not us who invented them. These are all thresholds that are taken from current EU or country legislation on heavy metals for soil or animal applications. Next. So there are further properties that are checked, like bulk density and water content, ash, surface area, and organic contaminants. So it's quite a complete setup of analytical measures. Next. And of special interest is the content of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are produced in the pyrolysis process. It's a very tricky thing because if you would use traditional soil analytical measurements, you wouldn't even measure these very low limit values, because the biochar absorbs these pHs, and it's very hard to get them off the biochar. And so we had to develop, and that was in 2010, 2011. It was the first work before the introduction of the certificate, a method for a standard method for analyzing pHs in biochar. This is a requirement: which solvent has to be used and what technique, to really get comparable data. And then again, these thresholds are the same thresholds that are valid for compost, for example, or for fertilizers, or for organic amendments, or for feed. So these pH thresholds, they are fairly low. And in the beginning, most of the companies, they had really problems and troubles to get that low. But together with these companies and with other research partners, we found the methods how to reduce pHs. And so if you adapt your technology following these guidelines on how to reduce pH contamination, companies get below these thresholds. Gasification technology, which we accept or which we interpret as pyrolysis or part of pyrolysis, they have more problems with pHs. That is unavoidable. It's part of the process, but there are gasification technology in companies that are well below these agronomics thresholds, but those that are not, we do not want to exclude these materials. They're still great to be used for building materials, like also for asphalt. So the asphalt background pH content is so much higher than this biochar threshold for EBC materials, so that it's safe to permit higher thresholds for materials. Next. So, as I already mentioned, in the beginning, most of the work was in fact to define, test, and standardize the analytical methods for all biochar parameters. Biochar was a new material at this time, and most of the methods had to be adapted. It was also part of a cost action to develop these methods. And now there's an accreditation process for laboratories that have to show proficiency, that they follow these procedures, and that they achieve the precision. So there, once a year, is a ring trial where all these EBC accredited laboratories take part, and other companies can also take part to qualify for accreditation. Next. So this is the DCC proficiency test, as I mentioned. Next. And so then check for the pyrolysis technology, and here most important thing is emissions, so that there are emission tests and that the emissions are low enough, and also that the energy is used. So as you know, 50% of the biomass carbon is transformed more or less into biochar. So the rest of these 50% is usually transformed into energy, but especially in earlier technology, the heat, and so these gases were burned and the heat was not used. So that was like just the loss of energy. We didn't want to accept this, so there are requirements to use the heat, but nowadays most of the pyrolysis companies, they have heat use, but sometimes it's a bit tricky because if you do not have someone who buys it. Next. So to more detailed point is how does it work? I mean, do you have to show every week or every month or every year that you are below the thresholds, and how does it done? So we define biochar production batch, which is usually the production of 1 year, or it's at maximum 1 year, 365 days. As long as the pyrolysis temperature does not change by more than 20%, and the feedstock does not change. So if you use a new feedstock, I mean a new feedstock class, it's not comparable to what you did before, and you change the temperature, so you would have to open a new batch. And a new batch means a new analysis, and you get a new certificate for each batch. And in most cases, companies, they are happy when they find a feedstock that works, when they find conditions, pyrolysis conditions that work good, that are efficient, and then they produce it whole year round with the same products, and then you have one production batch per year. Next. So there are some further control parameters, which is the work safety and health at the pyrolysis sites. How to sample the biochar. So nowadays we have accredited samplers that come to the company and take the samples. It's part of the controlling process because it's quite complicated and you can do a lot of errors, and companies in the end, they are happy if someone else does it, and we are happy because we know it's made according to the standards. You have to keep samples from the weekly productions, and labeling is also controlled. So you get, when you're certified, you get this stamp that you can use on all of your products. Next. As said, it is an independent on-site control. So the controller that comes once a year. It's, for the moment, this is one person that does all the European companies, and he regroups. If you have several companies in one country, he tries to regroup it to reduce also the costs. And so this is control visit is prepared, and it takes about a day that he's on site and controls all the processes and the papers, and then you get the actual certificate you get directly from co-inspector or bio-inspector. So this is the controlling body. Then you can use the EBC logo, but the certificate comes from the government accredited and approved control company. Next. So what is the cost? The cost, they depend a bit or a lot where the company is. If it's close to the polar circle and traveling is long, so this makes it more expensive. So there's a range here. that includes travel cost. And the most expensive cost is for the controlling. It goes to bioinspector, which is about 1,500 to 2,000 euros. You have analytical costs. The standard cost is 700 euro, but if it's for animal feed, it's a bit more expensive. There are some more analysis to be done. We charge a label fee, depending on the company, between 200 and 300 euro, and the carbon sink certification is 300 euro extra. Next. So we already said that we have the biochar producers, but also the manufacturers of biochar-based products and the traders. And it can be that one company is all three of them. So then this is in one certification process. This is not extra, it's all collected. And also we have carbon sink traders, so that do finally the selling of carbon credits that can be achieved with biochar. Next. So we have 31 countries from 31 companies for the moment, different countries. From Scandinavia, there are already Finland and Sweden. We do not have yet Norway and Denmark in the group. Next. So shortly, how is the procedure? So you would have to go to the EBC website and register your company. So you have the company registration. You then get a login. And if you want to become certified, this is directly communicated to bioinspector, who then send an offer to you about the introduction of the process. Next. So you then have to register your company, the processes, description of the company, and every new production batch. So all this is online based now. It's not so very complicated. It's always good in the first time to get the help of someone who knows the process. And that's, I think, is where Matthias comes in. He can show his experiences. I think time is more or less over, so I will stop here and not talk about the carbon sink certification, which is another quite big subject, which we can do another time. So let's keep focused and oriented on the actual EBC certification, which is anyway the first step and condition to become also carbon sink certified. So thank you very much and looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Hans-Peter. I would say I can see there are already some questions that have come in, but before we start with questioning you, we give the word to Matthias, who is going to talk a bit more about the EBC or its application in Sweden. You're still muted, Matthias. So in case you also want to say something. Yeah.
No, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Is it good? Or should I?
We see your screen, but it's not in presentation mode. So we also see the frame around it.
Now?
Not yet, for me at least.
Okay.
I can still see the presentation. Yeah, but now it's also with your comments or with the next slide on the right side.
Okay. Which button do I press then?
That is an excellent question. I'm not sure, but if you go back to the PowerPoint with escape.
Yes.
Yeah, and then if you down in the menu where you can, yes, I think the one next to it.
That one.
Yeah, just try and see what happens. Yep.
Is it better?
This one will work. Yep.
Great, thank you. My name is Mattias Gustafsson, as said in the beginning, and I'm working for Ecotopic, which is a consultancy firm, basically, focused on biochar. And we have participated in an innovation project in Sweden called Rest till Best. If you want to have a look at what we have been doing more than looking into the EBC, you can have a look at biocol.org. So what we did in this process of looking into how to certify biochar, we first looked in. We need to have a common understanding of biochar, because we had so many different definitions in Sweden. So I think it's also really important to have a clear definition, so everyone has the same idea what biochar is. And of course, we need a clarity towards buyers and producers. What I'm buying, what is it that I'm buying when I'm buying biochar? Of course, this is a lot of things that happen in the beginning. People are buying something that is black and they don't know if it's biochar, but they use it, and it's really good to have some kind of framework around the product. And of course, then create credibility of biochar. Getting it easier for people that are procuring biochar and using biochar. So our work process was basically literature study and on existing systems and regulations. We were interviewing everyone that I know of in the biochar field in Sweden, and both the producers, the market, and the researchers. And we had the workshops regarding with the relevant organizations that want to have some input for biochar standards. And what we saw, that we had 3 different ways forward. This was basically have a separate Swedish certification for the Swedish market. The problem with that is that if we are distance from the EBC, how do we sell and buy biochar over the borders to the rest of Europe or the Nordic countries, or accept EBC as it is fully? But we came up with accepting EBC with the Swedish appendix. I will tell more about that later on. So to develop the Swedish appendix, we had to identify the deviations between EBC and the Swedish regulations and conditions. So we had a lot of talks to the Swedish EPA, for example, to see where does this fit, and the Swedish agricultural authorities as well. And then we have a revision process in the work group. Basically, we had these workshops. We brought in all this information, and people could then, we came up with a final product, a draft of the final product, and then people could get comment on that one. So when it comes to the Swedish EBC Agro, we found 2 values that we somehow needed to change, or get a feeling that we needed to change at least. The first one is lead, and in the EBC Agro we have a value of 150 milligram per kilogram dry substance, but in the Swedish Swedish laws and regulations regarding sewage sludge, that's the only laws that we have, adding sewage sludge to soils. So basically all the compost regulations and so on, that is voluntarily though, they look at the regulations for sewage sludge, and that is 100 milligram. So we lowered that to 100. And the most common industry standard in Sweden regarding cadmium is 1 milligram. It's not the law, but it's the industry standard that we use. So that's why we lower the value to 1 milligram. And then we have this new EBC AgroBio, or organic, as was in Hans Peter's presentation. And the only thing here is it's most of the organic farmers in Sweden, they are connected to a certifying authority, not authority, but a certifying community called KRAV. Like 80% of all the organic farmers is KRAV registered, and they do not look that much into how much different pollutants do we have in the actual substrate that we put on the land, but they have how many grams can they put on lead, for example, per hectare. So that will regulate how much biochar they can use. And in these calculations, they have silver as well. So we needed to add silver, even though we probably will not have that much silver, but that could be, so they need to calculate with silver when we in this product to see how much they can add on the land. And I would say that during this process, we noticed that there were during the interviews and so on, we noticed that a lot of people were talking about the EBC is more or less made for Germany and Switzerland and so on. And our feeling that, or after this work together with EBC and Hans Peter, that is not the case really. The EBC is really open to do some changes, as we now did our own appendix. So I think that even though we have different standards or different regulations in the different countries, I think that EBC is a good way forward, since we still have this potential of markets selling biochar between the countries. Today we are importing quite a lot of biochar to Sweden from different countries like Finland and Germany and so on. But in the future, hopefully this year, we will increase the production in Sweden quite a lot. So who knows, in the future we might be the exporter of biochar, and if we had the same regulations or standards regarding biochar, it's going to be much easier. So thank you. I think I have my 10. So thank you. We'll stop share.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Matthias. We do have some questions. Julia, have you kept track a bit of what's been asked?
Yes, I have. So I have tried to select, we have quite a few, but first of all, I wanted to thank you, the presenters. Thank you very much for your presentation. And well, we can perhaps start from these questions that came a couple of times. So for Hans Peter, if you know more or less how long it will take before sludge or manure or alternative feedstock other than biomass will be allowed in the EBC as classes.
Yeah, it's planned for 2021. So I think it's quite clear how we go forward here. We worked a lot for the industry association in this process, in the EU process for the biochar regulation, and prepared a lot of documents for the EU to include sewage sludge biochar. In the end, they postponed this decision, but we see both for animal manure and for sewage sludge, we see that this is a key technology to get rid of several problems that we have with these residues, and we want to provide good guidelines to make sure to the industry and to the countries and how we can include it into the circular economy. So even if several countries will probably not allow it yet, we will do the certification to prepare the legal process.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's pretty soon, hopefully, that
Yeah.
this will happen. Then we have a couple of questions about the heat recovery, the use of the excess heat, if there are some indications about how much of it must be reused. And someone also is asking if in case a mobile system is used for pyrolysis, for example, an Exeter retort, if that can also be certified or not, because it cannot recover the heat.
Yeah, well, in regard to heat recovery, it's like a recommendation, and we can always provide an exception permit for certain circumstances. If, for example, a company prepares the heat recovery for the next 2 years, or if there is a mobile device where this makes no sense, and so we have always the possibility to look to each technology and decide what is required here. It's not about excluding any technology, but it's helping to improve the energy efficiency.
Yes, makes good sense. We have also a question regarding the C-Sync certificate. And someone asks if this, I mean, which entities recognize the certified carbon sink, and can you, for example, convert it directly into European CO2 certificates trading? How does it work?
Yeah, no, it's there are carbon sink traders that trade these certificates, they create and trade these certificates. So the two biggest is Puro from Finland and Carbon Future from Germany. So they are looking for these biochar-based certificates and made special products, because it's there are different qualities of sinks, and the biochar sink is of high quality, so the price is also much higher. So these certificates are sold between 50 and 100 euro per ton of CO2, which is much higher than the EU price, which do not accept yet carbon sinks at all, because this is about emission reductions. And what we do is certifying really the sink, so really the amount of carbon that's retained. But there is the market, is there, company looking for these certificates, and there are big companies that invested into it already, like Spotify and reinsurance companies, and so we really see this as a very important part of the biochar economy. It will never cover all the prices for the biochar. It's an addition. It can be maybe 20% of the biochar price, but it's significant, and it's important to certify it correctly, because we need these carbon sinks for the climate.
Yes, definitely, and yeah, hopefully the market will grow in the near future. We also have a couple of questions regarding the labs, the certified labs. First of all, if there is a list of accredited labs and where it can be found. I believe, is it on the website? Perhaps?
Yeah, it's on the website. You have a link on the top. It's about laboratories, and then you find the addresses of the accredited laboratories. So for the moment, these are only 3. But we're inviting laboratories to participate, but it's not so easy for laboratories, because first it's really special analysis. You have to introduce the methods. It's not so easy to pass the proficiency test. And then it's also about pricing, because these companies, they do a lot of biochar analysis, the tool that we have now. So they could automate quite some processes. So for new companies that want to get into this market, which is still small, they have not so much optimized analysis for these parameters, and are more expensive. So that's the reason that there are only 2 laboratories, but even American companies sending it to Europe because they do not have the same analytical qualities in their country.
Yeah, and regarding this, there is also a question regarding Eurofins, because Eurofins is quite a big company represented in different countries, but it seems like biochar samples, they need to be sent to Eurofin Umweltost. So I guess that is because that's the only one that is certified, or can you perhaps?
Yeah, Eurofins is, I don't know, maybe 500 laboratories all over the world, and usually they are like independent companies, but they are in the Eurofins network. So the Eurofins Ost is a specialized laboratory for all that's linked to carbon. That's and then you have Eurofins that are for feed or that are for viruses and so on. So they are specialized for carbon materials, and that's why they do all these analysis. And sometimes this Eurofin consortium is so big that they do not know internally who is the expert for it. So it happened already that they sent samples to Eurofin whatever in Oslo, and they didn't know about Eurofin Ost. So you should, the best is to register on our website. It doesn't require that you are really certified, but you could already register as a company, and then you get all this information, and you can also select the parameters for analysis.
Good, but yeah, as you were telling us in another meeting, so basically the application, the labs can apply every year for being certified, but yeah, it's not easy to get certified for biochar analysis. So that's why there are not so many laboratories available. We still have a couple of minutes, so perhaps we can take one more question. And let me see, I think we have a few left. Yeah, one about the 1-year batch limitation. If you can explain why there is this limitation on the certificate, and if it is the same process and it respects the given limits, will the producer risk a rejection of the same production after 1 year?
No, he gets this. It's usually done in the first 6 weeks. The control is done, and then they get the authorization to sell the whole year batch under this certificate. I mean, still they have to assure and sign that they will not change the parameters and so on. You have to understand this is you can, like in all certifications, you can cheat. Every company can cheat, but this is an illegal process. So it is not, the controller is not the police. It's like helping the company to assure that if they do all accordingly to the guidelines, then their batch is certified. If they deviate from it, then this is not correct, but it's their fault. We cannot check every day that everything is fine. It would be much too expensive. But it's like industry standard control. So if you follow the procedures, then you get the batch certificate for 1 year, and you are assured that you can sell it until the last day, and then you have to sign in the EBC website. You said batch ended here, we produced that amount of biochar, and we start a new batch tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. and so that starts the new process. It's a bit aleatory. I agree. We could also say we do it every 6 months or every 2 months or every 2 years. But we have to put a limit here. This is no mathematics. It's what we think is a good consensus to do it once a year. It's not too expensive, and we still have the control.
Yes. I think we ran out of time now, but we have a few more questions. But perhaps Hans-Peter, you can say where or if anyone has questions regarding the certificate, where can the information be found, or who people could contact to get specific questions answered.
Yeah, you can, if you go to the website, it's european-biochar.org. You have a contact form there, and you can send your questions. It will come to us and we will reply to it. And you should find most of the information you should find on the website. We try to keep it updated. It's quite a lot, it's quite complex. But do not hesitate to contact us to get clarification on any point.
We are also open, of course, to have in the future maybe another webinar which could be just about questions when this becomes more relevant in the Nordic countries. As you said, there's yet to be a company to be EBC certified in Norway. So we still maybe have some interest in the future. So if there's a high demand, it's of course also an option. Okay, I thank you all again for joining today's webinar. Special thanks to Hans-Peter and Matthias for presenting your work. As with all of our other seminars, we have recorded this one and we're going to publish it on our website. So you're free to look at it again if you've missed something. I think there was also a question if we would share the presentations. We shared the entire seminar, so I think that's very straightforward. As mentioned earlier, our next webinar is February 12th. You can sign up via our homepage. Sign up is not yet open, but will be open within the next days. You can also register as a member for the Nordic Network. It's free, but then you get an email every time there's a new webinar with a direct link to the sign up. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining today. Hope you have a good day today, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.